Stony Creek falls on the line from Cairns west through the ranges to the town of Kuranda. It's just one highlight of the most spectacular trip on the rails around Australia. For most people, usually tourists, their trip ends here at Kuranda Station, the prettiest in Australia. The comparison of this trip to that of Queensland's best-known train, the Sunlander, is of a pearl with its oyster. Obviously, travelling on the Sunlander is not always a guarantee of sunshine. Also, the 37 hours from Brisbane to Cairns can be a bit of a milk run. So the Sunlander stops dutifully at Petrie, on the northern limits of Brisbane, offering a last chance before it heads north. For the next day, night and day, it'll be home to arguably the most unusual cross-section of train travellers in Australia. It's still breakfast time, but the persistent tropical rain makes life on Queensland's so-called premier train at the least predictable. Some would say boring. People have resorted to their card games, the trivial pursuit of train travellers, far sooner than normal, unveiling a microcosm of Queensland life at the same time. In fairness, for most of its 30-year lifespan, this train would have seen far more sunshine than rain, but it's not uncommon in some stretches of the journey, one which often ventures into heavy rainfall areas so loved by the sugarcane growers. Nambour is the first of the major sugar towns, only a couple of hours up the line from Brisbane. The station master is instantly recognisable in his Queensland Railways regulation issue Python. A quaint anachronism normally, it becomes thoroughly incongruous in the rain. It's not the day to set a torch to the cane ready for harvesting in the thousands of hectares which keep this region alive. Yet late in the year, this is a familiar sight in the area. The cane industry operates around another set of rails, a network along the Queensland coast longer than all our metropolitan railways put together. It was the sugarcane trains on their 2-foot gauge tracks which helped to consolidate Nambour long before the Sunlander was even thought of. So it was with mixed feelings that drivers changed from steam to diesel in the 50s to 60s.
The steam were easier and more comfortable, but they were so dirty, they were hot, and, well, harder on the fireman. He had to work when he's on the engine. As it is for the diesels, he does nothing.
Nugget Wyland hasn't driven steam for years, but these days it's a labour of love on the Hilly tourist train at Mossman in far north Queensland. It's the only steam loco running on a regular basis in the Australian sugar industry. The Bally is an 062 Bundaberg Fowler. Put in simple English, that means it has no leading wheels, 6 drive wheels, 2 trailing wheels, and was built in Bundaberg under licence to the English company Fowlers. That was back in 1952, and it was one of only 8 made. Home is the Mossman sugar mill, where the Bally gets the constant attention due to the last of a dynasty. After each trip, it's on with the stack hat to conserve heat in the boiler or to keep out rust-causing rain. Even more important is lubrication, and the oil cups are topped up at every opportunity. She uses more than her fair share, and with too little there's a danger of the drive mechanism seizing up. Bally is basically 12 tonnes of temperament under the control of 40 kilograms of confidence in the form of Jenny Watson. Jenny's the only woman in Australia with a current steam loco driver's ticket.
I've been on this locomotive since we got it in 1980, but I've only had my ticket for 2 years now. Yeah, I've been driving it for 2 years.
And you're the only woman definitely in Australia, do you think?
Yes, so far as we know. We've gone through the machinery inspectors and they don't seem to know of any other.
What are the special joys of driving something like this old thing?
I think it's just that it's so completely different to anything else.
What about the literal driving of it? Is it hard?
No. It's no harder than driving a car. Once you learn what you're doing, you seem to do everything automatically.
At the Big Pineapple tourist complex just south of Nambour, they've tarted up old colliery diesels to look the part. No one seems to care that they're pretenders. Tourists' attention to detail is as rare as the rainforest which once covered this region and is now promoted as an exhibit.
Also in the rainforest you will see tree ferns, staghorns, elk horns, picker-bean palms, crow's nest, monkey vine.
If there's one thing tourist entrepreneurs all over Australia have learnt, it's about the value of trains as attractions.
Sugar is a major crop in Queensland, second only to wheat as the largest farm export earner for Australia. We are now rolling through rows of the 2 varieties of cane processed at Moreton Central Sugar Mill in nearby Nambour. On your left, The cane with the red stalks is Q90. To your right is NCO with green stalks. These varieties are grown for their high sugar content, but it still takes 7 to 9 tons of cane sticks to make 1 ton of raw sugar.
When the big pineapple train started in 1971, though, it was mainly as an attempt to keep visitors to the complex from wandering over the plantation indiscriminately. So what started as an experiment and possibly the smallest 2-foot gauge railway in Australia grew in stature to the point where it now has its own claim to fame.
Reputedly the steepest section of rail line in Queensland, the hill up which we're now climbing rises 1 metre in 14 around a curve with a 20-metre radius. As the train decelerates on the curve, you are in our pawpaw or papaya.
Of course, this presents tropical plantations in a very glamorous light. But Nugget Wyland was driving cane trains of all sorts, long before they became fashionable for tourists, and when cane was cut with large knives by hand in a torturous slog.
They were cut similar to this, but they used to cut it much longer, and it didn't weigh as heavy.
How much quicker would it be these days?
Oh, crikey. Well, in those days, one man would be lucky to average 10 tonne a day. Well, now you get 10 tonne in 2 of these bins. And that takes, I suppose, a good crop, 10 minutes to the bin to fill.
Cane trains in general carry more tonnage in a season than Queensland government railways in a year.
This was the main line in the early days. Most of the cane was grown either on the other side of the town or out this way. There's been such a lot of changes as crops got bigger. They used to go right over the range over here once. They could only get up there with 14 at a time. So they come along the river. They can pull, well now they're pulling with a remote control, 100 plus.
Large as it is, most of the cane rail network is never seen, although one of the most obvious exceptions is at Nambour, where it crosses the main street and dominates the town. During the peak season, there's a train every 20 minutes to keep the mill busy. Locals and through traffic are both at their whim, because the sugar season hits at the same time as the tourist season on the Sunshine Coast. The result is that Nambour becomes one ongoing traffic jam. But you can pick the locals when a train hits town. They're the ones who wander off to get an ice cream or drink when the lights start flashing. Most are involved with the sugar industry anyway. Visitors lack their tolerance for the little diesel battlers dragging their load to the mill with far more emphasis on timetables than any government railway. Once the season starts, the cane trains keep rolling. They need to, because the Moreton mill crushes 24 hours a day, stopping only for maintenance. And if cut cane is left for more than 16 hours, there can be problems with processing. Mills like this one are virtually self-generating, with the cane byproducts feeding back into the system, leaving the molasses and raw sugar as profit. That sort of efficiency translated to the railways may have avoided this glaring example of the sublime to the ridiculous. The line north simply avoids the town of Maryborough, so that passengers have to change here at the Baddow siding. Today, 2 passengers and 2 crew will make the trip into Maryborough, a whole 3 kilometres away, in a brake van that's been around for more than 70 years. Baddow Station's claim to fame is that it's one of only 2 places on the rails around Australia, both in Queensland, where the train pulls into the station, then has to back out again onto the main line. European style. It feels as if the whole exercise has been set up for the Baddo brake van and its loco, which waste no time heading off to the mystery town of Maryborough. At least it saves the Sunlander backing up 3 kilometres. Not that it matters much up here where the trains take it easy, because it's usually just up the track from Baddo where the northbound Sunlander waits for the southbound.
Right, thank you.
How are you today?
Very well, sir. You see the 12:15 sitting will be commencing in the dining car shortly.
There are no frills on any Australian long-haul trains, but even less on the Sunlander. It's the only one, for example, where you're asked to pay for your meal instead of having it included in the fare. Public relations is not their strong point. And since the Sunlander is always heavily booked, it doesn't seem to matter. It's sad in a way because, given the route it takes, parallel to the Great Barrier Reef all the way, it has the chance to be Australia's #1 train.
What would you like, sir?
Grilled steak and apple pie and ice cream.
All right. Would you like a steak with vegetables or salad?
Salad.
Great, okay. Thanks very much.
And then can I get a bottle of Riesling wine?
Riesling, just the one bottle, is it?
Yeah, just one glass.
One glass. Right, thanks very much.
One of the quirks of train travel is that people tend to territorialise. If they find a spot in the club car early, it becomes theirs. But on the Sunlander, those who retreat to their compartments avoid a curious set of priorities.
When you finish at that hand, would you kindly cease playing cards, please? We're about to start the liquor session.
Rightio then, thank you, guard. That's it. No, step away now.
We're about to start the liquor session. There's no playing of cards during that session, if you don't mind, please.
Drinking is strictly club car business, and they mean business. Their regulations also mean there's no piano, music, radios or cassettes, let alone video.
How did you react when you heard that?
Well, I'm not going to go on the trains again, am I? I'm going to fly again from now on.
Yeah, there's no harm in playing cards or backgammon or chess.
I asked the guard what the session was. I felt so embarrassed. He said, will you stop playing cards because of the session? And I said, well, what's the session? I thought we were going to have a jam session.
But Queensland Rail is appeased, and the cash register starts to tick over. The Sunlander's route north is an interesting design. If it misses Maryborough altogether, at Rockhampton it goes for overkill, right down the middle of a main street and nearly always at night.
Just be careful when you're getting up from the ladder that the rungs are securely in here, you see? Otherwise, the sway of the train, you're liable to get a bit of a tilt.
Might tip the train over.
beauty. You won't see me for a week.
Sorry, under your head? No?
Nice. It's all right for all. How are you going down there, girls?
This is Sunlander sleeping economy style, without bedding provided, but still a rung ahead of the sit-up passengers.
Good night.
By daylight on the second day, the Tropic of Capricorn, which runs south of Rockhampton, is well behind, and so is the rain, which in turn has made the train late. It might be time for fresh linen in the privacy of first class, but up the back of the train, sleeping in becomes a very public affair. But just part of coping with the timeless environment.
The worst trip I've ever had going to Cairns, and I've been there lots of times.
That's not true. It's a good trip. Well, you can't help the train wobbling like this.
And after all, the track to Cairns is 1,600 kilometres long and only just over a metre wide. Queensland has stuck with the old 3-foot 6-inch narrow gauge, and now there are plans to extend it. So bullet train country, it isn't.
I blame the drivers. He hasn't even made up 5 minutes, what all the time we lost in Rockhampton.
But this track can claim almost 100 years of service, helping to haul countless trains over scores of crossings like the one at Ayr on the Burdekin River. The Queensland coastline is packed with rivers like this, but many go unseen because night falls at some of the most interesting spots in the Whitsunday region. North of Ayr, en route to Townsville, it's hard to believe we're on roughly the same parallel as Fiji and just past the halfway point of the Queensland coast. The fact is that Australia's largest tropical city is surrounded by a huge dry belt of countryside. It's an area where the inland comes to the coast. And it's only when glimpses of the ocean are commonplace across the huge marine flats south of the city and Magnetic Island becomes obvious that it's clear why a man called Robert Towns financed a settlement here 120 years ago. These days it's regarded as the unofficial capital of far north Queensland. Magnetic Island is now a suburb in a population that has doubled to over 100,000 in 20 years. It's also headquarters for the Northern Division of the Queensland Railways, so it's pretty well set up to become the centre of a much vaunted secession movement. Supporters would prefer to see the Sunlander as a long interstate trip rather than the longest intrastate trip in Australia. The distance is highlighted by 2 Sunlanders passing for the second time in 24 hours. Any other line around the country would have taken in 2 states to cover the same distance. Townsville is the outlet for all the ore coming from the mines at Mount Isa, over 900 kilometres due west of here. It's been a popular port with ships' crews since the days of sail, and was established for that reason in 1864. This is the heart of Townsville, gateway to the tropics, and romantically its boundaries encompass many of the reefs, islands and offshore waters on the edge of the Coral Sea. But to the west, Townsville is filling its arid plains with rampant suburbia, amongst the fastest growing in Australia. It comes as a total surprise to passengers who expected rainforest on the other side of Castle Hill. The last leg from Townsville to Cairns is the most eventful, the noisiest and the booziest, with associated smatterings of Dutch courage. The Townsville-based crew makes up for it with their friendliness, a condition that appears in Sunlander crews progressively the further north we travel. This leg has become second nature for Keith College and mother and daughter team Rosie and Alice Stemminger, and it seems tonight is not nearly as outrageous as some.
Now this bloke had a foul, a chook, and
He's prize chook, don't forget. He's best
right, chook. And he ended up killing the damn thing in the shower, plucking it, and he was going to cook it.
No, they were stuck for 24 hours at Townsville. I'm not sure there was, I think it was the flood zone. And he was said, you know, you can't have your chook with you. I mean, this is a first class sitting area. You'll have to put it in the guard's van. He said, no, my chook will die. I said, oh gosh. So he ended up getting out his little knapsack with his Bunsen burner and come have you. And he got the end of a bread and butter knife. Nobody thought anything about it. Took his chook into the shower, killed his chook, proceeded to pluck and cook it in the shower.
When the booze starts talking, so does Keith. He employs a hands-off policy wherever possible, preferring to be a mixture of diplomat, confessor and father figure. There are longer legs for crews to work on the Sunlander, but none which require the attention of the last few hours before Cairns.
Hey, Wally Bingers. Rather than 10, we got on, we had none. Make it a 4X, mate. Hey! Ella, viva Australia! It's #1. Viva! Viva! Viva the railway!
On a visit to Cairns not long ago, Prince Charles told locals they lived in paradise and they knew it. Yet there was a time when Cairns looked like remaining a one-shop town. Then came the era of sugar. That brought the railway. The original objective to open a port for the collection of customs dues faded. Sugar now shares the local limelight with tourism. Cairns is the closest city to the Great Barrier Reef, and boating and big game fishing are predominant. There's also a sizable prawning fleet, so up here they're pleased that Paul Hogan has extolled Americans to put a shrimp on the barbie. Neither have they been backward in their own efforts to sway the slogan-weary Yanks. Now the people of Cairns realise they have few peers anywhere as a tourist centre, and things are changing. Slowly it's throwing off the deep north conservatism in more ways than one. Women are even included in the council workforce. A few years ago, that would have been unthinkable. The carefree nature of the city is still as much an attraction as anything. But in the new look Cairns, even the old suburbs have a charm which can be fostered for tourists as part of the Cairns Kuranda train ride. Buildings along the run up to the mountains west of Cairns are typical North Queensland architecture. The railways certainly haven't been left out of the tourism drive. In fact, the train pulls more tourists than any other attraction apart from the reef, and that's with little promotional effort. There's nothing special about a 1620 class diesel electric loco, but the carriages are vintage. They cry out for a bit of entrepreneurial shuffling to put a steam loco up front. Perhaps something like the original PB15s. That would give the train a profile worthy of the countryside it has to pass through en route to Kuranda. First it travels wide to get a run at the 330-metre climb ahead. There's no more spectacular sight on the rails around Australia than the one which starts in the cane fields just outside Cairns. At Horseshoe Bend, the train often slows to 7 kilometres an hour and almost doubles back on itself to follow the natural gradient. There can be problems in the wet season or with a heavy load, like slipping on the track. It's not nearly as troublesome as in the days of steam before the mid-60s, when sand sometimes had to be literally shovelled onto the line to help with traction. According to veteran driver Len Hicks, there are still times when the train has to be divided and taken up half at a time.
Oh, you do strike difficulties in wet weather due to slipping, but overcome by sand, which is delivered automatically or manually.
What do you mean? You can put the sand on the tracks as you're going along?
Yeah, from the foot pedal down there.
So what's the difference between that and the old days of steam?
Well, steam, it was all operated manually. You had to pull a lever and the sand flowed from a sandbox on the boiler down through pipes and just dropped on the rail.
Would you like to bring steam back to the Kuranda line?
Personally, yes.
Why?
Well, I think it was a much better life, more mateship.
Yeah, how?
Oh, well, everyone had to work together more as a team. It was quite a good effort. In those days, it was man against machine.
In turn, it's been machine against mountain, and to build the line, man against mountain. It took hundreds of men 4 years of constant labour to complete the 34-kilometre stretch to Kuranda, including 15 tunnels built the hard way. Pick and shovel, combined with clever use of explosives. Some reports say as many as 8 men died forging the railway through here to service the gold mining fields in the tablelands beyond. Others say they can't be sure how many fell to their deaths, never to be found, or simply deserted without telling anyone. Despite a work environment of magnificent virgin forest, it must have been a daunting experience, especially at Stony Creek, where the bridge spans the gorge and skirts the waterfall. The man responsible for pushing the line through is still remembered. Rob worked on other railways, but this one was regarded as an engineering feat with few equals. It's been nearly 100 years since enterprise like his prospered on this line. Now it's emerging again through a company which leases carriages from the railways and provides tour guides to make the trip interesting. The fare is double the government charge, but the private enterprise carriages prosper. The view is the same, the carriages are the same, only the approach is different.
Round 4, 5 minutes. The guard of 42. Thank you.
Barron Falls is subject to a regulated flow because the river feeds a power station deep in the gorge. From here into Kuranda, it's almost level. The plateau provides the bed for the Barron River and some of the most beautiful scenery imaginable. The gem at the end of the journey is Kuranda Station, built in 1915. The railways say it's believed to be Australia's first precast concrete structure. Fortunately, such a claim seems out of place when you consider how well the abundance of tropical ferns and shrubs cover that concrete. Bill Anderson, the gardener, is dedicated and travels all over the place to find new and unusual plants for the platform. The tradition was started by a station master over 60 years ago. Timber cutters would bring in or collect plant specimens for the early garden. The irony there was that as more forest was destroyed, the station became a living museum for many of the species that were found around here.
Round.
Yeah, but what is
When
that?
it touches it.
Don't you spoil my picture.
To call Kuranda layback is an understatement, although the tempo does pick up on Sundays, market day.
Avocado's good for you. Sugar right inside. And it makes complexion good.
It's then the town shows that it's become an unusual hybrid of hippie and hype. Despite all the typical flea market trimmings, the hype seems to be winning the battle. Or maybe the new breed of locals are simply learning to play the tourist dollar with a gypsy deftness.
People don't wear shoes in Kuranda very much, but when there's a cold snap or if they're travelling south, suddenly they want to wear some shoes and something like this pair. Well, we've got plenty of, there are plenty of cowboys around here, real cowboys, and they're...
How much for that?
They're $30.
It's likely that when the boot was on another foot, it was much more representative of the traditional macho tablelander cattleman. If nothing else, Kuranda represents an emerging integration of lifestyles in far north Queensland.
People are travelling through from all parts of the world, and sometimes I buy things, quite obscure things from them. And I learn a great deal from it, because sometimes I put some object out and I don't even know what it is, and someone will come past and tell me all about it and how they had one when they were 10, 50 years ago. It really is a market.
Okay.
The trouble in the Kuranda of the 80s is in identifying the real locals. It's now the type of place where even the old-timers are new. What got you to come to Kuranda?
Well, for health reasons, mainly. The best area you can find anywhere, to start. We're a couple of thousand feet above sea level, and you've got millions of trees around you. And as you know, trees are giving off the oxygen, which is what we need, and it's the most purest oxygen you can find anywhere in the world.
How do you know it's the best place in the world?
I know how I feel. I was 76 Thursday, that's 3 days ago, and I've never felt better in my life.
Inevitably, more and more tourists will do just that. Thousands make the trek each year now, but it comes as no surprise to find all but a handful use their return ticket on the unique rails around the Kuranda Ranges.